Hey guys, welcome to Ukrainian Couple. My previous video was pretty popular about why I left Ukraine. I mean, I got some nasty comments about how I'm drinking Starbucks in a safe country far away from harm, but I assure you I'm not doing well, far from it. I lost everything I had in Ukraine and I have to start all over again. I have no car, I have no apartment, I have no furniture, nothing. I don't know if anybody watching my videos are in the same position, but if you are, please let me know. But I'm not complaining, and I just thought I'll continue this video on a more positive note. So, today I want to talk about how the whole world was wrong about Ukraine and how Ukraine managed to demonstrate who they really are in a very short time. Well, many people thought that Ukraine wouldn't really last more than 3 days. Now everybody has watched how Ukraine has liberated over 4,000 square kilometers, maybe about 3,000 square miles of their own territory. And now everybody's watching very closely about what Ukraine is going to do next, like where they're going to strike next. And most importantly, they're trying to figure out whether Putin is going to do anything about it. But let's just roll back a little bit, half a year ago, and realize that nobody really believed that Ukraine would counterattack. Let's be real, nobody really thought that Ukraine is going to last more than a few days. I mean, I didn't really believe that a war would happen. I made a video about it. You can check it out in a card above. And I thought in that video that it was all bluffing. And it seems strange to me that they moved troops to the border and out, there and back. But I thought they're just going to do a few threats and be done with it. But then Putin made that infamous speech about Ukraine and how he's recognizing Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast as independent countries. I thought that Russia's going to pull a little annexion move, like how they annexed Crimea. I thought Putin might gonna do that because his election is coming up in 2024, rather his re-election. And he's gonna try to, just attach those areas to Russia. Anyway, there was a pretty, widespread feeling that a full-scale war is not gonna happen. And simply because it hasn't happened before. I mean, we're talking about a full-scale war in Europe. And I wasn't the only one. I mean, this was echoed by a vast majority of experts and journalists and everybody really feel the same way. But you know what's really funny? Nobody has actually made this following argument that the war will start, but the armed forces of Ukraine will prevail and will counterattack. That's because the consensus was that if there was a war in Ukraine, Ukraine would certainly lose. What everybody was doing was just comparing numbers. They were comparing, the sheer number of tanks, infantry, planes, helicopters with Ukraine's numbers, and that picture wasn't pretty. So that's why, even though Washington and Western intelligence realized that war could start at any moment, helping Ukraine with heavy weapons was a pretty bad idea, and it was out of the question, really. Why? Well, it would just all end up in the hands of Russia anyway. After all, investing so much money arming Ukraine just to get it taken by Russia is a pretty stupid move, let's be honest. That's precisely why the West has first gave Ukraine just armor, helmets, javelin, rocket launchers. It was all just made to help Ukrainian partisan fighters and guerrilla fighters to fight more effectively. The hope really was not on the government, the Ukrainian armed forces. The hope was on the civilian population taking up arms. I mean, the West, and especially America, in their very famous call, tried to persuade Zelensky to leave Kyiv. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I can't really fault them for it at all. The West did what they thought was right. And they even continued that way of thinking and way of action even as bombs started flying all over Ukraine. I mean, I will never forget that morning of February 24, 2022.
The Defense Ministry urged citizens to take shelter and prepare Molotov cocktails and take up arms to defend their city. It says his country is left alone to defend itself.
Yeah, and everyone is reiterating that right now. Putin doing what he wants to. Heading over to Ukraine, though, Ukrainian President Zelensky saying that he is going to stand by the people of Kyiv and stay in Kyiv right now. He's not retreating.
The United States, the White House has been warned that the capital could fall very quickly.
I will never forget that panic that I had all around me. I will never forget the queue at the military office with people aged 18 to 70 of all different faces and backgrounds waiting to fight. I will never forget people in Kiev, in my area, that wanted to go across the city to look for rifles, just get their hands on rifles and guns. I mean, I will not forget this endless curfews on weeks and weeks on end, because maybe there could be a Russian sabotage group here or there trying to, like disclose the plans of the Ukrainian military. And these people could be hiding in the apartment next door, next door to me. I will not forget the feeling of helplessness when the Russian army was in the Obolon district in Kiev. The missiles were flying in the Obolon district, in the apartment buildings, and blowing off chunks of them. I will not forget about the dead guys that I was learning from, like my friends. I had dead friends here and there, dead classmates. It's just hard to forget that. I will not forget the men who never held a gun in their hands, who wanted to get a rifle and go into the forest to hide and hunt for Russians. But what I'm trying to say is that I think that Putin, in the first days of the war, scared the world a lot more than he does right now. Because during the first days of the war, if Kiev fell, then it would definitely mean the end of Ukraine, and I firmly believe that. In those first couple of days and weeks that Ukraine stood ground, and analysts and reporters saw that Russia has these columns of, armored vehicles, they realize that these columns are poorly manned, they're poorly managed, and they're not really getting anywhere. They're occupying a little bit more than an actual road that's leading up to the target or like a large city. They can't really encircle any city, really. That's when the West realized that things are not going so well for Russia. And what did Russia do? Well, they took it all out on the civilian population. In Irpin, Bucha, Mariupol, Kramatorsk, all these terrible attacks. I mean, I don't have to explain them, I don't have to go over them. You all know what happened, probably. If you don't, you can just Google any of those cities and figure out what happened for yourself. And all these attacks happened at the backdrop of Vladimir Zelensky, Ukrainian president, who I think very skillfully used every single opportunity to meet and interview and call with anybody who could, really, to garner support for Ukraine. He made Ukraine sound like Europe's savior, and basically soldiers are preventing the evil from reaching Europe and the rest of the civilized world. I mean, Zelensky has done everything from giving interviews to Russian journalists, to getting a standing ovation at the US Congress, to speaking in parliaments all around the world. Let's not forget that, unlike Putin, he actually visited the front lines as well. But I mean, I don't really think any of that happened by accident. The Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian president, the cabinet, the parliament, the Ukrainian people convinced the world, really, that they're brave, they're courageous, and they can and will protect their home for as long as necessary. I mean, people aren't saying that victory is going to happen soon, but they are talking about this victory in Ukraine. But all of that just shows that Ukrainian war is winnable, and that really has changed the narrative in the West. It changed the attitudes, the messages of support. It helped the West understand that it can give Ukraine, real practical help, and that Ukraine will address these challenges. And namely, Europe can also address its own challenges. I mean, it's going to have a difficult winter. It's going to have problems with gas and cost of living and prices increases. And it doesn't really matter. All of these challenges can be addressed, especially when the win in Ukrainian war is achievable and victory is possible. I mean, we know that by looking at how Russia's reaction to the situation on the ground has changed.
Берите власть в свои руки. Похоже, нам с вами будет легче договориться, чем с этой шайкой наркоманов и неонацистов, которая засела в Киеве и взяла в заложники весь украинский народ.
Мы сделаем все для того, чтобы это все прекратилось как можно быстрее. К сожалению, только противная сторона, руководство Украины заявил об отказе от переговорного процесса, заявил о том, что хочет добиться своих целей военным путем, как они говорят, на поле боя. Но, тем не менее, мы вас будем всегда держать в курсе того, что там происходит.
Because when things aren't going well for Russia, they're going to take it out on the civilian population. I mean, we all remember the Vinnytsia attack, the Kremenchuk mall attack, and the countless attacks that still, keep hitting, like Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, and other areas. The areas on the front lines that keep getting hit all the time. I mean, just recently Russia fired these missiles at the Kryvyi Rog Dam, raising the sea level 2 meters and flooding whole city blocks, and blew up water treatment plants in Kharkiv and damaged the power plant in Kharkiv as well. This also has happened. I mean, most recently, Russia has left a mass grave of mostly like 450 tortured and shot people in the Izum area. I mean, the West is focusing on the tortures and deaths and the atrocities committed by the Russian army. The West is also focusing on something else. I mean, the West is talking about the Ukrainian offensive, and namely how successful it was and what are the future plans of the Ukrainian offensive. The media is talking quite seriously about Ukrainians' ability to retake Kherson and Mariupol eventually and head to Crimea at one point. And as far as retaking Donbass, well, I mean, Russia can forget about it. I mean, you simply can't do a pincer maneuver if you only have one pincer, really. And that's basically what happened with the recent offensive. But how will the war unravel right now? Well, it all depends on whether or not Russia will get the manpower. The Russian soldiers around the Donbass area fled so fast that they left tons and tons of ammunition. They left tons of tanks and armored vehicles and APCs. Obviously, they need the manpower, otherwise they wouldn't leave so fast, they would fight. In the meantime, tens of thousands of inmates are being recruited in Russia. I mean, we have the Putin's chef Prigozhin. He armed and trained, and soon will be heading all these people to Ukraine. I mean, he keeps saying that war is hard, but hey guys, after 6 months of service, you guys will all go free. Everyone is buried in the alley as heroes, he says. So, how do we sum it all up? Well, the world at first refused to believe in the power of the Ukrainian armed forces and instead believed in the might of Russia's military. Now it turns out that Russia, with their bombing and their terror, demonstrated that they cannot win this war. The aim of Russia's terrorism, really, and evil, is to scare Ukrainian civilians, and most importantly, the army and the government to surrender. We can all see that Russia has failed at all of that. Ukraine is counterattacking, is doing a counteroffensive, a successful one. We are waiting to see where Russia is going to hit next, but we're more eagerly waiting to see where Ukraine will attack. Anyway, that will be it from me today, and I hope you guys have learned something about Ukraine here. Hit like and subscribe if you like my content, and I'll keep you guys updated. Take care.